What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So recently Riot Meddler announced on the forums that they're going to be testing out a 15-minute surrender option for League of Legends that could actually be hitting these servers quite soon, and it's something that they're going to be kind of messing around with and just try to see how it plays out. And it's kind of interesting to think and really just analyze how this could potentially affect the game. So if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, feel free to hit that dislike button too, and let's begin. So with the forum post in question, the direct quote exactly here is unanimous surrender, so a 5 for 5 votes at 15 minutes is the version we were looking to test. That slipped as a priority relative to the new client and preseason work. We'll be getting back to it soonish, most likely though, probably going to start off with a test on one region only, then assess whether it's working as intended or not, and whether we should roll it out wider. So according to this Riot Meddler quote, it seems like the thing that they're trying to figure out for the 15-minute surrender vote is going to be something that is unanimous only. So if you have 4 people vote to surrender, well, it's not going to pass until the 20-minute mark. And it's something that they're just going to be testing. They're not going to put on the PB or whatever. They're just going to hit it on one region only, probably like a smaller region or something like that. And then kind of, spend some time gathering statistics, see if it works out. Because there's a lot of like hidden potential downsides that this kind of sort of change could potentially have to the game. But it's definitely interesting to see that this kind of change is actually happening at all. So the biggest discussion that I want to have when it comes to this topic really is kind of just something, why does the surrender limit have a timer in the first place? I think that's definitely the biggest question that you want to consider here, because it's definitely not an accident that you have to wait 20 minutes to be able to surrender a game. Why not just let any time in the game surrender? If you have 5 people vote to surrender, why not, right? You could just surrender at any time and that's it, right? But unfortunately, it does actually create quite a lot of problems. Now, the thing, at least the main reasons why the surrender limit has a timer in the game right now is essentially because, surrendering is not a small deal by any means for most games, right? Sure, there's definitely the 1 in 100 game where you get some intentional feeder or maybe someone AFKs or something like that, and the game's just, you literally have no chance because, it's just hopeless because of something that you can't control. Those games are different, right? I'm talking about mostly like the average solo queue game, Surrendering does create quite a negative mindset for a lot of players. When surrendering is available, a lot of players will just give up because they just want to surrender and move on to the next game. And there's actually been quite a lot of discussion in the past about removing the surrender option altogether, because it really does encourage quite a negative mindset of just giving up too early in the game. Players might decide, 5 minutes in, they're maybe 0-3 in lane, having a bad time. Okay, this one's over, we're just going to surrender at 20, move on to the next one. And that is a mindset that is definitely something that you do not want to encourage, because it's very toxic. Maybe the rest of your team doesn't want to surrender. It's not fair for the rest of your team for you to just give up completely if you want to surrender, and then you spend the rest of the entire game trying to convince your team that they will surrender with you, which is really not something that promotes, good gameplay and stuff like that. And especially, it really does create like a potential, I can't exactly say create, but there is cases where, because of the surrender option, a certain player might be more toxic or try to convince the rest of their team that the game is over in a situation where it might not be, or maybe the rest of their team wants to keep playing or thinks that they still have a chance or something like that. And as a result, you have one player kind of dragging the team down with them almost, if that makes sense, in hopes that, well, you're going to end up surrendering. I know Korea is actually notorious for having a reputation of players that just feed first blood and then just give up completely. And that is something that essentially, that's the reason why the surrender vote has a timer at all. So decreasing that timer is potentially going to amplify the negative effects that the surrender limit, or that surrendering has at all in the first place, So lowering it from 20 minutes to 15 minutes is potentially not the best thing to do. It could potentially increase the downsides that surrendering has in general. So that's why there is a surrender limit. Now, is that surrender limit necessary? It probably is, to be honest. I mean, if you could surrender at any time, at any point in the game, if you could surrender, 30 seconds into the game, like, is that really something that you want to be playing a game with in solo queue? It definitely does make sense that there's some sort of limit on when you're supposed to be able to give up. So I think it's definitely a good thing that the surrender limit has a time window. Now, is 15 minutes going to be late enough for that time window to still have the same sort of impact that it does? Now, the thing is that maybe it actually is. If you think about it, the games that are surrendered at 20 minutes, right? If you play a solo queue game and your team surrenders at 20 minutes, and you actually do surrender at 20 minutes, do you really lose the game in the last 5 minutes of that sort of gameplay? Is the game really being decided in the last 5 minutes if you're surrendering at 20 minutes? And I would guess that, 99 times out of 100, it's probably not, to be honest, if you're actually surrendering at 20 minutes. Most games that are surrendered are never surrendered at 20 minutes. It's honestly such a rare occurrence for games to be surrendered at 20 minutes. You have to just be so far behind, so just ridiculously have no chance of coming back, or just something that's totally bad that happened to you. Maybe you had an AFK, maybe 2 AFKs, or maybe you had some intentional feeder, or some guy that just rage quit, or something had to have happened for you to surrender at 20 minutes. I think the last time I surrendered a game at 20 minutes was when I didn't have some sort of troll or AFK or an intentional feeder or something like that. The last time I surrendered a game at 20 minutes when I didn't have one of those on my team was I can't even remember, honestly. It's such a rare occurrence. So the thing is that 15 minutes might be late enough. It really might be, especially if you're considering the fact that it has to be unanimous. So you have one player on your team, no matter what. If you don't want to surrender, your team's not going to surrender. So it really has to be everyone. And convincing people on your team to surrender is definitely not as easy as it sounds, and it's something that is, not necessarily that practical, right? You can't entirely convince your entire team to surrender. There's just one guy that's just going to vote no, and that's how it is. So for the entire team to unanimously want to surrender, that's such a difficult thing to do. Even the games that I play that I do surrender, it's almost never a unanimous vote unless the enemy team's like literally right on the nexus, right? So getting the entire unanimous vote of surrendering is actually quite difficult. It's definitely not easy by any means. And the fact that it's so difficult makes it potentially less likely for more toxic players to try to convince their team to surrender. Hopefully, at least. I think that's what Riot is trying to go for the most part, because it's so much harder to convince every single player to surrender than it is to convince, 4 players to surrender. It's a lot different of a dynamic in that sense, because a unanimous surrender vote is something that's going to happen because you either have an AFK player or you have just everyone in the game just doesn't want to be in the game. And overall, it's something that's not necessarily that bad of an idea. And 15 minutes is probably still late enough to not encourage the sort of mindset of, giving up too early, or maybe encouraging your teammates that the game's already over or something like that. 15 minutes is still kind of late enough into the game where if the game is like that, if you're that far behind at 15 minutes where your entire team wants to surrender, you probably weren't going to win anyway, I guess. Now, I can't say exactly for sure, because that is quite a big decrease from 20 minutes. It's a whole quarter of the entire duration. So surrendering at 15 minutes is definitely a lot earlier than surrendering at 20 minutes. And it's not impossible that a lot can happen in those 5 minutes. So I guess we'll have to kind of see how it plays out. I mean, it could potentially be really, really awesome if you have an AFK player on your team, or maybe you have some guy that just wants to bring your whole team down and just doesn't want to play or something like that, you know? And in that sense, it's something that could be actually really amazing. So overall, I definitely do believe that this could be a pretty solid change. Personally, I would like to see more proactive changes towards addressing AFKs, or sort of like intentional feeders, I guess. It's, you know, this definitely is not the best solution for that, so it's a little tricky to see what Riot is trying to go for, but at the same time, the difference between a unanimous surrender vote and a 4 versus 1 surrender vote is a lot bigger than people give it credit for, so it's definitely the case that this could be a very positive change for the game, and especially for the solo queue and, you know, flex queue experience as well. Hopefully Riot will do some different changes to alleviate the problems that AFKers and intentionally feeders create for regular players in the future. You know, I think Riot's definitely a little bit too afraid of creating a system that can be abused by other players. You know, there's so many like options that they could do to alleviate the experience that AFKers and intentionally feeders bring to the community, but they're just like so afraid of them getting abused or being misused or something like that. But honestly, I don't know if that's necessarily the best reason to avoid implementing those kind of solutions, because to be honest, you know, AFKers and those kind of players are probably the biggest thing in League of Legends when it comes to like ruining the experience, you know, when it comes to like making things less fun. So, I mean, I think this could be a step in the right direction. We'll definitely just have to see how it plays out, though. But who knows? I mean, what do you guys think about surrendering at 15 minutes? It's definitely a pretty interesting topic. But looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. It really helps me out. But if you didn't enjoy the video, you know, you could feel free to hit that dislike button too. It's all good. And yeah, that's going to be it. So if you guys enjoyed the videos, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys next time.